further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight. Jim Wallis, CEO of Sojourners, is a best-selling author, public theologian, speaker, and international commentator on ethics in public life. He recently served on the President's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships and currently serves as the chair of the Global Agenda Council on Faith for the World Economic Forum. His latest book is Rediscovering Values: On Wall Street, Main Street, and Your Street, a moral compass for the new economy. His two previous books are both New York Times bestsellers. He is president and CEO of Sojourners, where he is editor-in-chief of Sojourners magazine, which has a combined print and electronic media readership of more than 250,000. He frequently speaks in the United States and abroad. His columns appear in major newspapers, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, and the Boston Globe. And he frequently appears on radio and television as a commentator on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. You guys have all heard of him. And so, without further ado, let's all welcome Jim Wallis to the stage.
Good evening. Good evening. Oh, come on. Do better than that. Good evening.
Good evening.
I am really sad that Ibu isn't here. So we were in Chicago just together last week. He said, we get to be together for a whole night. He said, this is my alma mater. I want to show it to you. So he called me. I was stuck at O'Hare because of weather. He called me from LaGuardia where he was stuck, and he was just really upset. And he just sent me a text. He just sent me a text just a minute ago, and it said, he said, I am really bummed out. But I'm in Washington next Wednesday. Can we have breakfast? But at least you're at my alma mater, he says, talking about interfaith collaboration. So it is great to be here. And I left this morning, I didn't bring a talk, because Ibu and I were just going to sit in two chairs and just talk, you know. And we're going to start with this story, which I'll start with. It's how I met Ibu Patel. So, he was a very young man in his early 20s, and he just showed up in Washington, D.C. one day to the Sojourners office. He said, I'm here to see Jim Wallis. And my staff said, well, that's great, but Jim is here today, but he hasn't been here for a month. And he's in meetings all day, and you can't just, see him. He says, really? He says, no, you can't. Yeah. So, Ibu, if you know Ibu, he found out where I live. He did. He found out where I live. And when I got home at 7 o'clock, here's Ibu Patel, this young guy, sitting on my front steps. He stalked me. You know this about him. Yeah. And he said, Jim, my name is Ibu Patel. I came all the way across the country to talk to you. Could I just have 10 minutes to talk? So I sat down, and we talked a lot longer than 10 minutes. We've talked a lot ever since. But tonight, we're just going to talk. And then he got stuck in New York. So I am really, really sorry that he's not here, because we were both looking forward to it. As me, a Christian and a Muslim. Now you just got the Christian, But at least a Muslim woman introduced me, thank you very much, and mentioning Malcolm X, who had a tremendous impact on me as a young Christian teenager in Detroit when I was about 15 years old. And I love the image you just laid out. Here's what happened. Dr. Martin King Jr. from Selma to Montgomery marched alongside Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great Jewish leader, the Baptist preacher, alongside. More clergy came out for that march than any other time in the Civil Rights Movement. And that's how we got the Voting Rights Act, because of what happened at Selma. So I thought about Malcolm X, Dr. King, and Abraham Joshua Heschel as you were talking. And I wondered, who are the leaders from those traditions now among you, who are going to be those kinds of leaders. That's why you're having this conference, right? That's what this weekend's about. So I'm just going to open up things with some remarks, and then Greg's going to come up, we're going to sit in the chairs, and let you have at us and ask questions and have a little town meeting here at Champaign, Urbana. I was thinking there, I'm having to leave the crack of dawn because I'm also a Little League baseball coach. And I'm missing practice tonight. This had to be important. But I've got a 9-year-old son that I coach. My 13-year-old who I coached is now graduated way beyond me, so he's running practice for me tonight with the 9-year-olds. He's a much better coach than I am now. My game tomorrow, I gotta be home for the game. But I was thinking about Jack, my 9-year-old, who one Sunday morning, we had a recent baseball conflict, church versus baseball. It was a very religious, theological discussion. And I think Jack would have fit in here because he said, Dad, don't get me wrong, I really do appreciate God a lot. I'm just really bored in church. So I thought you'd probably fit this conversation pretty well. A new generation is less and less affiliated religiously. All the data shows that. And yet it doesn't mean they're walking away from spirituality, from God, from faith. But they're talking to each other more about those kinds of questions. Yesterday, Georgetown, Tim King, way in the back, so wave your hand, Tim. Tim King and I went to Georgetown, where I teach sometimes, and the whole day was about millennials. They released a big survey in the morning about many of you, millennials. And they had a panel in front of these millennials. And I was the only non-millennial on the panel. And every millennial leader said, now, I don't really identify as a millennial. But it got to me and I said, I don't really identify as a millennial. One of them said, someday, he said, when we're old farts, he said, so I said, I'm the old fart. And my kids are premillennial, they're 9 and 13, but I have these conversations with 13-year-olds all the time. And so, this is a household conversation for us. And that makes a point, because we are shaped and defined by our relationships. Who we're close to, who we talk to, whose stories we know and don't know. So one night watching the news recently, Jack was kind of around, not paying attention, he was in the room, and it was a newscast and somebody said something really ugly about Muslims. Jack, who was doing a Lego thing, picked up and says, wait a minute, what did he say? And Luke told him, he said, I have got Muslim friends at school and they're not like that, and that's not true. Who's in our household conversations? Whose relationships are shaping us? This survey released yesterday is very, very interesting. I would commend it to you. Georgetown and some others put it out. College-age millennials, aged 18 to 24, are considerably more racially and ethnically diverse than the general population. Fewer than 6 in 10, 57% of millennials self-identify as white, compared to 72% of the general population. The millennial generation is a preview of the America to come. The America that's already coming. And so part of your vocation, part of your task, is to navigate an American future. You're previewing where we're all going. Those are facts, whether people like it or not. Those are facts about who we're becoming. By 2050, most Americans will trace their lineage. Africa, Asia, or Latin America. Most. And the country isn't ready for that. The majority population isn't ready, and you're the ones who are going to have to get them ready for that. And we're now very diverse religions than we've ever been before. It's great to have a Calvinist and a pagan talking about their worldviews. I thought that was pretty cool. Calvinist and pagan. You guys always talk about your worldviews, you pagans and Calvinists. You're also much more independently minded. You're less affiliated religiously and politically and with your parents' categories. You are really outside many of those categories. You're not defined by the categories as much as the previous generation, which means your generation could reconfigure things. Get that? That's important. If you're not defined by the old categories, it means you can reconfigure the old categories. Politically, you're more independent. Sojourners yesterday released a video. It's very cool. I had nothing to do with it, but I watched it. It's very cool. It's called Voting for Us, sojo.net, sojo.net. It's a whole bunch of young people, none of them are more than 25 or 6 or 7. And it's what they're voting for this election. They said, we're not voting for candidates. It's a post-candidate politics. Not voting for parties. For super PACs. I'm voting for, said one, I'm voting for those who are being trafficked and sold into sexual slavery. I'm voting for the 1 billion people in this world living on $1 a day or less. I'm voting for a friend of mine who's had a 5th tour in Afghanistan to bring him home to father his daughter. I'm voting for the 2nd graders I teach for their educational opportunity and future. I'm voting for Anna, who I want to be defined by her character, not by her immigration status. They're voting for people, voting for issues, voting for causes, and that really takes them away from just candidates and parties. See that sojo.net, check it out. It's a very, very impressive video. That's indicative of what I heard yesterday at Georgetown. And from a faith point of view, it's being prophetic instead of political in the biblical sense of that word. I was pleased to see that, for example, nearly 3/4, 73% of college-age millennials agree that the economic system in this country unfairly favors the wealthy, and majorities of members of all political parties agree with that. Democrats, independents, and Republicans among millennials. And they say that we don't give people in this country, we don't give everyone an equal chance in life. I love that because those really are religious values. For my church, those are biblical values. In all of our faith traditions, those notions of inequality and fairness and justice, as you were saying, Calvin wasn't the only one. And that is what's going to bring us together here. Yesterday at Georgetown, there was a lot of discussion about morality. And on the panel, they said, we want to have a conversation, a moral conversation, not about politics, ideology. And yet, while the focus is on morality, there's also a toleration, a tolerance of people who have a different point of view. That doesn't mean we don't care about morality. We do, but we want to have a conversation, a dialogue that's respectful and civil, and, in fact, can change us. So the question I asked them was, every generation finally is really defined by their moral compass. What's your moral compass? What really guides and directs and shapes your decision-making, your choices, your values, your beliefs, your actions? And in particular, the question is, what kind of values will you be sacrificial for? For what kind of values will you sacrifice energy, time, risk, sacrifice. The difference in events like this and movements is sacrifice. Events happen because they're interesting. Movements happen when people sacrifice. Malcolm and Martin and Abraham had sacrificed for their values. They didn't just have interfaith dialogue and conversation. Let's have cool. No, they sacrificed for common ground. So I'm curious to see what your generation is going to sacrifice for. What's important enough to you to make you sacrifice? Now, one of those key things, I think, is going to be relationships. I was in a call today about immigration reform. We're very involved, Sojourners, in the need for comprehensive immigration reform. And now we have this table. And it's always, it's Hispanic Christian leaders, but also white evangelicals and Southern Baptists are at the table. People who are going to vote differently in this election, but they're together about the need for fundamentally changing a broken immigration system. At the border, we have two signs up. One says, no trespass. The other says, help wanted. In between those two are 11 million people stuck in a broken system. And I've seen how even the white, evangelical, conservative Christian world is changing on the issue. Why? Because those Anglo churches have gotten close to Hispanic churches, and people have become friends. So I was in a White House meeting one day with all of Obama's people on immigration, Valerie Jarrett, all these people, and I saw these California, Orange County, white megachurch pastors saying, but you're deporting. You're deporting our people. You have more deportations in your administration than the last one. You're deporting our people. And Valerie Jarrett says, oh, no. We only deport people who are doing drugs and crime, cartel. No. You deported, this is a white person. You deported Jose. And now his son joined the gang. And tears are running down his face. And the political like, oh no, we're only. I said, Valerie, hold it, Valerie, listen to the pastors. They know the people. You apparently don't. Okay? What's changing them? Politics, arguments, reading books, relationships. That's what's changing. Young evangelicals have a very different view, much more tolerant, accepting, much more empathetic toward gay and lesbian people than their parents were. Why? Because they have gay friends. They've gotten to know people in their families, in their dormitories. This study from Georgetown wasn't really so terrific, though, on our issue. It said that the attitudes toward millennials toward whether Islam is compatible with American values, the data wasn't much different or better than their parents. Still about 50-50, not very good. So what does it mean to be changed by your relationship with people who are Muslim? Undocumented people, gay and lesbian people. This gets us to a very big sort of issue or category in my tradition, and all of ours, I think. It's how do you deal with the other? The other. You see, nations need the other. Empires need the other. The business of war, and it's a business, needs the other. Those people who we can talk about and demonize and make people afraid of because we have other plans that we need to get them to be afraid. How we deal with the other, how we are shaped, depends on who we let define our enemies and who we let define who the other is. So we don't do interfaith work to abandon our faith identities. That's not why we come. It's not why we're here. I have been to Calvin College, and I remember you were in the front row, I think. Most Calvinists I know aren't ready to abandon their identity. So why are they here? Right? We're not here to abandon we're here to find common ground. How do we do that? How do we do that in a world defined by the other? Well, my tradition, Jesus said, "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Blessed are the peacemakers," he said, "for they'll be called the children of God." Paul said, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. These maybe are the hardest sayings of the gospel. You haven't heard many sermons on these texts in churches since 9/11. I've been paying attention. This isn't often the sermon text. And yet, it's very clear what the scriptures say about this. Nations turn their enemies into the other and heap all manner of motivations and frightening capacities on them. And that cultural baggage is widely overstated and often totally false. We fought a whole war in Iraq based on information patently untrue. And now, the consequences. Nick Kristof on Sunday, New York Times. We're still losing. And our response to 9/11 is wars of occupation, which have not worked. We lose 1.5 men or servicemen or women every day. As Nick points out, we lose a veteran who was there to suicide every 80 minutes. Every 80 minutes. The stress of empire. It doesn't work, this strife. How do we deal effectively? We will have, if I have a notion of what my Bible says, we will have real enemies. There's conflict in the world, tribes and nations and groups. But a new generation is seeing the answer is in a whole new area of study and action called conflict resolution. Think about this. Most of our human conflicts that we have in the world, most of them are resolved without violence. Most are. Every day. So all we're talking about is increasing the number of conflicts that are resolved without appeals to violence and war. It's an art, it's a discipline, it's called conflict resolution. And here's where religion should help us, and not just provide more ammunition for the conflicts. Religion, at its worst, provides ammunition for the conflicts. At its best, as Eva and I have been talking about for years, it's about how to resolve the conflicts. People of faith should be the best at resolving conflicts. So, stories. Let me just tell you a story. So in the run-up to the 9th anniversary of 9/11, the year before this past year, I came home from vacation with my wife Joy and Jack and Luke, pulled into the garage. Within 10 hours, I was on Fox and CNN and MSNBC because there was this Islamic cultural center being built just about 2 blocks away from Ground Zero. Fazl Ruoff and Daisy Khan, who were the ones leading this, are friends of mine. And they called and said, Daisy said, our biggest concern about the cultural center until yesterday was there wasn't enough stroller space. But now we've got a problem. Can you help us out here? So I had to get on TV, and and then at the same time there was this pastor, alleged pastor in Florida, Terry Jones, who was planning to have a bonfire of Qurans, burned Qurans. This at the same time. So here was my message on American television. Faisal and Daisy are not terrorists, and you shouldn't burn Qurans. Felt really positive, really exciting, and Eva and I are talking all the time. This is really exciting. We're out there with this pot. We're friends, they're not terrorists, and you shouldn't burn Qurans. It was a horrible, horrible time. Because the media loves conflict. They love conflict. I mean, all the Chicago TV stations are here tonight. I'm really glad. You're all there, cameras, newspapers, you know, because it's a big story. Interfaith, young people working together, service collaboration. This is a powerful, big story, and here they are. Thank you very much. It'll be a little papers to my front page. I don't think so. But vandalism against some mosque in the suburbs, that'll get in the paper, right? The media loves conflict. So we're having all this conflict. And so I'm pleading with CNN and the rest to tell the stories, because there were really good stories about this kind of thing going on. We are better off since 9/11 than before in terms of understanding each other. We are doing better. But that's not the image you get in the media, is it? But we are doing better. Finally, Sunday morning, after a whole week of this, I was watching CNN, and they finally did what I pleaded them to tell a good story. Here was the good story. Heart Song Church in, ironically, Cordova, a suburb of Memphis, Tennessee, which is where, you know, the Cordova Center in New York, all this. And so, a year before, they heard, this is a Methodist church, they heard, evangelical church, that the Memphis Islamic Cultural Center was coming to their neighborhood. So Steve Stone, the pastor, they put up a sign. Heart Song Church welcomes Memphis Islamic Cultural Center. Big sign outside. Muslims were floored by this. A couple days after, they showed up and they knocked on the door timidly and said, we were kind of hoping to be, ignored. and you welcomed us. Why? Steve said, well, Jesus tells us to welcome our neighbors. And I hear you're going to be neighbors. I apologize, we don't know a lot about Islam, but we're eager to learn. Before long, the kids were playing together. Before long, they were doing projects on tutoring together, homelessness together, and the good old pork barbecues began to have a lot of meat. All of a sudden, there's a relationship, a conversation going on. The next year, they said, the Muslim friends, new friends now, said, our center isn't done yet. The construction isn't done. And we need some place to celebrate our traditions. And so they did, in the church. In the church. So CNN puts Steve Stone and the imam on TV on that Sunday morning. And they're sitting there, and clearly these two guys are friends. They had a clear knowledge of each other, affection for each other. They're talking, telling stories, they're laughing. Clearly they like each other, and you can tell something good is happening. So I was literally in tears on that Sunday morning. Finally. Here's something, Christian, that I can be proud of. So I called Steve. And I'd never met him, we'd never talked. I just thanked him. I said, I can't tell you, after being in this battle all week on television, to have that on Sunday morning, it was my church on Sunday morning. I don't know how to thank you. And then I learned he was a Sojourners subscriber. I felt even better about it. So here's what Bob Smigiano, the religious writer for the Tennessean, said. When the Islamic Center of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, 200 miles east of Cordova, put up a sign on their property announcing a new building, a vandal spray painted the words "not welcome" on it. Neighbors filed suit against the mosque, arguing that Islam is not a religion and the mosque was a terrorist training compound in disguise. The construction site started at the site of vandals set fire to the equipment there. Earlier this year, Tennessee introduced a bill claiming that practicing Islam was a sign of treason, an amendment against Sharia law, which Sharia law is actually a big threat to Tennessee. But then he said, but in Cordova, things have been peaceful. There have been no marches against the mosque or other public opposition. Aside from some angry emails, the two congregations have gotten mostly positive feedback about their relationship. They've been featured on local and national news. A film crew from Bahrain came to town to film a story on the congregations. That small act of kindness was the start of an unlikely friendship between the two congregations, one that made headlines around the world. Steve said, can I tell you something that just happened? I said, sure. 2 nights ago, I got this call from Pakistan, Kashmir. And it was a room full of Muslim men calling. Is this Pastor Stones? Yes. Well, we watched that CNN segment. We saw it. And for a long time, we just sat in silence. Nobody said anything. We were so stunned to watch it. And then one of us said, I think God is speaking to us through this man. Another one said, we can't kill these people. Another one said, well, the other one, he said, he didn't say anything. He just got up and left, and he went out to a little tiny Christian church near our mosque. And he went and he cleaned the church. He washed the church with his Muslim hands. And we all came back now to call you, to talk to you, and to say, Pastor, we want you to tell your congregation that we don't hate them. We want you to tell them that we love them, and that we're going to do our part like you've done your part. We're going to take care of that little Christian church near our mosque for the rest of our lives. Now, that's a very moving story to me, but it's not just a sort of a lovely interfaith story we can share together. I want to ask a quick question. Which works better to change hearts and minds in Pakistan? What Heart Song Church did, or the drones? Which works better to change people's hearts and minds? Which makes my kids safer? Which makes our world more secure? Which approach do we think will be most effective in resolving the conflicts that we have with our brothers and sisters around the world? That's what your generation is going to have to do. This is your task, your generation. And the role of faith is absolutely crucial. When you have conflict between faith, we don't need less faith. We need more faith. Better faith. Deeper faith. The answer to bad religion isn't no religion. It's good religion. And that's what you're doing here. Your task is to teach a nation how to treat the other as if they were your neighbor. That's the religious vocation that you have. Thank you very much.